Now on BBC1, Barry Took airs some more of your points of view.
Good evening. Tonight we're mainly concerning ourselves with what you've all written about Triangle, which finished its present run on April the 1st. But before that, here are your views on various other subjects. First, Sylvia Staff of Crick, Northamptonshire.
Drama, humour, pathos, human endurance stretched to the limit. A superb performance by everyone who took part. Thank you for showing us the London Marathon.
And from long-distance running to one of television's longest runners, Malcolm Muggeridge, and this letter from David Sergus of Linlithgow, West Lothian.
I have a pretty strong stomach and can take any amount of sex and violence on BBC TV, but what has sickened me lately is the sight of that grisly old clown Muggeridge sneering and sniggering at the kindly but misguided Americans who were trying to make him feel at home in their towns. It was a disgusting performance from one who professes to be a Christian, but merely one more proof of the man's hypocrisy.
A vituperation worthy of Muggeridge himself. But here's the other side of the coin. Mr. Mervyn Lickfold of Thornton Heath writes of St. Mug.
How refreshing to hear a man with a mind as agile and stimulating as Orwell's, while possessing a wit on a par with that of Oscar Wilde.
Fair enough? Good. Well, let's press on then with two letters I've been delighted to receive. The first is from Mrs. K.I. Johnson of Pensby, Wirral. She writes,
Dear Barry, I am deaf, and may I express my delight in watching the Songs of Praise programme from the Church for the Deaf, Glasgow. The sign language of the hymns was truly wonderful, and enjoyed by my friends and members of my family, who all have the gift of hearing. More of it, please.
Well, thank you for writing, Mrs. Johnson. Now, it is, as you all know, the Year of the Disabled, and Brian Short of Northampton was delighted by a recent Man Alive.
My thanks to somebody at the Beeb for Thursday's Man Alive feature on 2 about 3 very independent people, Alison, Billy and Steve. Although I missed Alison and caught only part of Billy, I was greatly moved at Steve's guts, his determination and achievement. And I'd hazard a guess that Alison and Billy were just as inspirational.
Well, Brian Short asks if there's any chance of the programme being repeated. His letter explains why.
6 years ago, I broke my back, became a paraplegic, and joined the ranks of the disabled. What a lot of us there are. Still, at least I knew the happy times. These guys and Alison have never known what it's like to be fit and healthy, so hats off to them, and start waking up, you able bodies.
And thanks to everyone who's written in praise of that particular Man Alive. Well, while we're on the subject of Man Alive, their programme on road safety, which we mentioned last week, will in fact be repeated on Tuesday the 28th of April at 7:45 on BBC1. But now for something completely different. Have I heard that before? Anyway, here's Anne L. Kyle of Enoch Hamilton, who writes...
Did I hear Barry Norman of Film 81 on Monday night speak of Paul Michael Glazer of Husky and Starch, and he didn't realise he had said it. I believe it's called a spoonerism.
And I believe it's called a joke. And here's another from Pat Simmons of Winchester.
Dear Barry Took, my daughter was very surprised to see your clip from One Man and His Dog. She had always thought that programmes about sheepdogs were called the old grey whistle test.
You have to smile. But now, Triangle. Well, so much for the pictures. Here come the words. Alison Rook of Spalding writes...
Psst. Am I allowed to say something bad about the BBC, yes?
Yes, seeing as it's you.
Good. Well, the new serial set on the sea called Triangle isn't up to the usual high standard of programmes shown on the Beeb.
What a dreadful thing to say. But here's Duncan Hudson of Sunderland springing to the defence.
Could you please tell me the reason why everyone says rotten things about Triangle? In my view, Triangle is almost as good as Points of View.
Quite right.
P.S. Points of View is rubbish.
I don't know what to say, but Susan Miller of Emsworth, Hampshire, does.
Dear Barry, I think Triangle, the new television programme, is rather excellent.
There you are, a fan. But here's a backhander from W.J. Hanman of Rickmansworth.
Please do not pan Triangle. We connoisseurs of the gruesomely awful savour every episode. Collector's pieces, the ultimate lowlights of the viewing week. May we hope for an upmarket follow-on series starring the ship's cat?
Well, that was one of the 283 letters we received to date on the subject of Triangle. Opinions are on the whole equally divided among the fors and the againsts. This letter from R.J. Noyce of Plymouth is in the latter category.
After watching several episodes of the BBC's latest offering, Triangle, I have come to the conclusion that it is utter claptrap.
Mr. Noyce continues...
As a merchant navy officer myself, one of my greatest fears is that some of the viewing public might actually believe that this rubbish has some element of truth in it concerning life working aboard a ship. I assure you, sir, that it does not.
But Mrs. E. Houghton begs to differ. She says...
What's wrong with me? I like Triangle. Unless you have worked in that sort of environment, you cannot understand that those seemingly petty occurrences are very real.
Well, the reality of Triangle is questioned by many, including Mrs. Andrea Abbott of Sherborne, Dorset.
The biggest mystery regarding this series concerns the passengers. Where are they? And the crew, for that matter. Perhaps the plot, and that's another mystery, what plot, will eventually reveal that the enigmatic Miss Laker is on board to trace all those missing persons. I hope she finds them.
And while many have complained that they've seen more people on the Marie Celeste, many just lie back and enjoy it. Claire Hamilton-Bate of Exeter, for instance.
I liked Angels, but Triangle beats it any day. It's not just good, it's brilliant.
And Hilary Stooks of Otford, Kent says...
I say down with those who don't like it.
But in the harsh words department, we received several comments. The first from Roy B. Morris of Highgate, London, North 6.
Rumour has it that in the very last episode of Triangle, one of the characters is to be given a line of dialogue that is not a cliché. Can this rumour be confirmed, or more likely, denied?
Well, now, if you watched on Wednesday, you'll know. Another adverse comment on the series comes from octogenarian Beatrice Gray of Hungerford, who says succinctly...
If this is entertainment, give me a rollicking row about the will after the funeral.
Everyone to their taste. Alistair Wilson of Marlborough says of Triangle...
It's about as entertaining as a brick.
But Muriel Pilkington of Bolton says...
I think the TV series Triangle is terrific.
And while Elissa Collins of Nottingham says...
I think it is one of the best programmes the BBC have shown for a long time.
Edward Brown of Hull says...
My view is that the BBC should emulate the principal actress and her bra. Take it off.
Well, as I've said, the pros and the antis just about balance each other. But in a spirit of goodwill to all, I'll finish with these two comments. The first comes from Christine Smith of Preston, Lancashire.
Thank you and congratulations to the BBC for giving us good, chair-gripping drama with brilliant casting.
And the last word on the subject goes to Jackie Smith of Farnborough, who says of Triangle...
I agree the acting may not be in the same class as Clark Gable's performance in Gone with the Wind, or even the sheep in One Man and His Dog, but I find this serial highly entertaining and very enjoyable to watch, as do many others. Long live the Triangle line.
And you can't say fairer than that. Well, Points of View is taking a break now, but we'll be back at 10 to 9 on May the 1st, scattering blossoms and brickbats far and wide. Till then, have a good Easter, and thanks for writing. From us all, good night.
If you have any comments on BBC television programmes, please write to Points of View, BBC Television Centre, London W12 8QT.
On BBC Two now, Robert Robinson referees another edition of the word game, Call My Bluff. Here on BBC1, in 25 minutes, a highly respected friend of Starsky and Hutch is accidentally killed by a young policeman, causing his son to turn to crime. Now, the 9 o'clock news with Richard Baker.
President Reagan still making good progress, though his temperature went up during the day. The Chief Constable of West Yorkshire faces an internal police inquiry, but it's not clear why. A car bomb kills an off-duty policeman in Northern Ireland, and a civil servant escapes a similar attack. Poor design and safety standards are blamed for last year's North Sea oil rig disaster. And something different for Prince Charles in New Zealand, pedal power instead of horsepower. Good evening. For 4 days now, the American people have seen nothing of their president. Since the attempt on his life, Mr. Reagan has been in carefully controlled seclusion in a Washington hospital. In spite of assurances, there have been fears about his condition, and they rose today when his doctors said he had a slight fever. They'd been expecting it after his operation. Mr. Reagan's temperature rose to 102 degrees, but since then it's gone down, and any concern there might have been is said to have disappeared. There had been further concern during